The stars were burning out. Entire civilizations had fallen silent. Once proud empires, with fleets that stretched across galaxies, had been reduced to ashes in the void. The enemy was not an army, it was something far worse. A shadow, a silence that is consumed without mercy. World after world had begged for salvation, and one by one their voices were extinguished. In the end, only one choice remained. Not the mighty conquerors, not the ancient empires, but the fragile, stubborn species that no one had ever taken seriously. Humanity. Whispers carried through the void. They're too small, too reckless, too unrefined. But desperation silences pride. And so, when the galaxies cried out, it was humanity's turn to answer. We were the species that had clawed our way up from extinction. We had stared into the abyss of our own destruction and refused to bow. We were fragile, but unbroken. And now the last hope of countless worlds rested in our hands. But the enemy had never faced humanity before. They thought they were unstoppable. What happens when the unstoppable meets the unbreakable? The message arrived on a night like any other. On Earth, the streets of New York buzzed with neon and laughter. A father walked his daughter home from school, her small hand gripping his as she told him about the picture she had drawn that day. Across the ocean, a young woman in Lagos balanced books on her lap and hope in her eyes, studying by the dim light of a solar lamp, dreaming of becoming a doctor. In Tokyo, an elderly man set out his chessboard at the park, waiting patiently for the friend who always showed up 5 minutes late. Life, fragile, fleeting, beautifully ordinary, continued. Humanity, for all its scars, had found a rhythm. We were still learning, still fighting our small battles against poverty, against injustice, against the storms that nature hurled at us. And yet there was always something stubborn inside us, a spark, a refusal to let the darkness win. But while we dreamed, the galaxy trembled. The first whispers came not from governments, but from the scientists who watched the stars. Faint signals, then silence. Entire systems blinking out like candles in a storm. It didn't make sense. Whole civilizations don't just vanish, not unless something vast, merciless, and patient is sweeping through the void. Still, life went on. The little girl in New York practiced her piano piece. The young woman in Lagos passed her exams. The old man in Tokyo laughed when his friend finally arrived. But then came the night the sky itself changed. Satellites caught it first, a flicker at the edge of the solar system. An object. No, not an object. A wound. A patch of darkness where the stars should have been, growing larger, swallowing light, swallowing sound. The world leaders dismissed it at first. A glitch, a distortion. But the scientists knew. They'd seen this before. Other galaxies, other systems. Always the same silence after. Something was coming, and humanity was not ready. The governments scrambled. Old rivalries faded overnight as humanity did what it had always done when pushed against the wall. Adapt. In bunkers and war rooms, generals argued over weapons that suddenly seemed far too small. In labs and observatories, scientists scribbled furiously, desperate to understand the impossible. And through it all, ordinary people tried to carry on. Parents still kissed their children goodnight. Lovers still held hands beneath the stars. Soldiers still polished their boots, whispering prayers they weren't sure anyone was listening to. Because deep down, everyone felt it. A chill in the air, a silence between the heartbeats. The storm was coming. And yet, when the galaxy had cried out for help, when the oldest empires had crumbled, when the proudest warriors had fallen, who was left? Humanity. The fragile ones, the reckless ones, the survivors. We were not ready for what was coming. But then again, when had we ever been? And maybe that was exactly why we were chosen. If you're feeling the tension rise, stay with us. Humanity's story is only beginning. Make sure you're here for every chapter. Like this video, share it, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The sky burned. Billions on Earth looked upward and saw streaks of fire cut across the heavens. It was not meteors, it was war. Thousands of alien shadows descended, blotting out constellations that had shone for millennia. The news anchors fell silent. The generals clenched their fists. The scientists whispered the same grim truth. If they reach Earth, it ends. There was no fallback, no hidden weapon, no second chance. Humanity's last stand had come. And so, the world united. From every nation, from every people, the call went out. Volunteers poured into the ranks. Pilots barely trained and strapped themselves into fighters. Engineers welded weapons with their bare hands, sparks stinging their eyes, but determination kept them steady. Even children wrote letters to soldiers leaving for the sky, scrawled with words of hope. Come back. Don't let the dark win. The fleets rose one final time. Crude, scarred, patched together, but burning with something the shadows had never faced before. Human fury. The battle was chaotic. The first wave of shadows struck like a tidal wave, and human ships vanished by the dozens. Yet every loss was met with defiance. A crippled hauler, its engines failing, detonated its core directly in the path of the enemy, tearing a wound in the darkness large enough for a squadron to surge through. On the ground, orbital cannons thundered. Entire cities went dark as power grids were rerouted to fuel weapons that scorched the sky. Civilians huddled in shelters, clutching radios, whispering prayers, their voices trembling but never breaking. And then came the moment that defined humanity. The shadow's largest form emerged from the void, vast as a continent, swallowing half the sky. The scientists named it the Maw. It was not merely a destroyer. It was the end, bearing down on Earth with silence so absolute it made hearts falter. Panic rippled through the command centers. No weapon could touch it. No fleet could slow it. Humanity was out of time. But in the chaos, a voice rose. It was Admiral Reyes, the woman who had led humanity's defense since the first silence fell. Her voice, calm and steady, echoed across every channel, reaching soldiers, engineers, civilians, even children clutching radios in the dark. If the Maw reaches Earth, humanity ends. But if we end here, let it be with fire. Let it be with defiance. Let it be with proof that humanity was never prey, but predator. We will not bow. We will not fade. We will burn so bright the galaxy remembers our light. Her plan was madness. Brilliant, desperate madness. The last of humanity's nuclear stockpile, the antimatter cores scavenged from experimental reactors, even the fuel cells of every civilian ship still clinging to orbit. All of it. Everything channeled into one final strike. The plan required a sacrifice. Someone had to deliver the payload directly into the Maw. No drones, no remote systems, only a living hand could guide the unstable mass. Dozens volunteered instantly. Soldiers, pilots, even scientists. But the Admiral silenced them with a single command. I will go. The protests roared. She ignored them. Humanity's leader, humanity's firebrand, humanity's heart, choosing to walk into the abyss herself. Her ship, battered and scarred, launched into the void. Behind her, humanity watched. On screens, on radios, with tears burning their eyes and fists clenched against their hearts. The Maw opened, a vast wound of shadow reaching to swallow her whole. And Reyes spoke her last words, her voice carrying across every channel, etched forever into the human soul. Remember this. Humanity kneels to no one. She plunged into the darkness. For a heartbeat, there was silence. No sound, no light, only the abyss. And then, the universe ignited. Every weapon detonated at once, a chain reaction of impossible brilliance. Fire brighter than any sun tore through the Maw, shredding its silence, unraveling its void flesh, ripping the unkillable into nothingness. The blast lit the skies of Earth as though a second dawn had come. Shadows shrieked and recoiled. For the first time, the enemy retreated. The Maw was gone. Reyes was gone. But humanity stood. Billions wept and cheered in the same breath. Soldiers screamed her name across comms, their voices raw with triumph and grief. Children in shelters cried tears they did not understand. And across the galaxy, in the ashes of fallen worlds, whispers rose. The humans fought the dark. The humans did not kneel. The humans One. And yet, as silence fell again, one truth remained. The shadows had been wounded, but they had not been destroyed. They would return, and when they did, they would remember the species that had scarred them. Humanity. The fragile, the reckless, the unbroken. The last hope, and perhaps the galaxy's only chance. If that stand gave you goosebumps, stay with us. Humanity's story isn't over, and the shadows are not finished. Subscribe now because the next chapter will decide not just our fate, but the fate of every star in the galaxy. The silence broke with a scream. It wasn't a sound humans could hear with their ears, but the instruments caught it, an impossible ripple tearing through the void. An electromagnetic shriek that shattered satellites, fried comms arrays, and knocked out half the telescopes pointed at the stars. And then came the shadows. They weren't ships, not in any form humanity understood. They were moving scars against the sky, shapes that swallowed light, darker than the black they traveled through. When they passed, the sun dimmed. Whole planets turned cold in hours. At first, humanity thought it was a war we could fight. The fleets scrambled, the pride of Earth's nations, warships that had never seen a real space battle. They launched into orbit with banners, with defiance, with hope. They lasted 12 minutes. The first engagement was over before it began. Missiles fizzled uselessly against the void beasts. Lasers scattered like raindrops into fog. And then came the counterstrike. The alien shadow reached out not with guns, not with fire, but with silence. Ships went dark. Engines failed. Communication cut. Thousands of human soldiers, brave and ready, found themselves drifting powerless in the void, suffocated by the nothing that clung to them. Earth watched as its first defense fleet vanished, without a single alien weapon ever firing. Fear took root. News feeds flooded with images of cities building bunkers, families fleeing coasts, markets collapsing. For the first time in centuries, humanity felt truly small. But humanity does not break easily. When the first wave failed, the second was built. Not sleek ships, not noble fleets, improvised weapons. Freight haulers converted to war barges, asteroids fitted with engines and hurled like slingshot stones, soldiers armed with rifles they barely believed would matter. And still, it wasn't enough. The shadows came closer. Mars went dark. Colonies on Europa screamed for help, and then were silent. The lunar base, Earth's proudest step into the stars, was swallowed in the black. Each loss cut deeper. Each silence left a scar. Families on Earth huddled around radios, waiting for messages that would never come. Mothers wept for sons stationed in orbit. Children grew pictures of stars that would never shine again. Fear twisted into grief. Grief twisted into fury. And it was then, in humanity's darkest hour, that defiance rose. The old rivalries dissolved. America, China, Russia, Europe, Africa, names that had once divided, meant nothing now. Humanity was one banner, one desperate race staring into the abyss. The engineers worked without sleep, their hands trembling but steady. They built weapons that should never have existed. Nuclear cores ripped open, plasma torches turned into cannons, drones carrying warheads like sacrificial lambs. The soldiers trained with a fire that no one could extinguish. They knew they might never return, but they sharpened their resolve like blades. And the ordinary people, they did what humans always did. They adapted. They dug deeper shelters. They kept the lights on. They whispered bedtime stories of heroes to children, even as the sky grew darker. Because deep inside, even when hope seems lost, humanity endures. And then came the first true battle. The alien shadows descended on the orbital shipyards, determined to snuff out the last of humanity's resistance before it began. They came in silence, vast as mountains, endless as night. But this time, humanity was ready. The improvised fleets rose, not polished, not perfect, but burning with fury. Engines roared, cannons spat fire, nuclear detonations lit the void like newborn stars. For the first time, the shadows faltered.
One of them staggered, just for a moment. A wound of light appeared against its endless dark. Humanity cheered. Soldiers screamed through comms, their voices shaking with triumph. But victory came at a price. The shadows answered with fury of their own. A dozen ships vanished in a heartbeat. Entire squadrons blinked out of existence. The cheer of triumph turned into gasps of horror as commanders realized the truth. This battle was no victory. It was survival. Still, survival was enough. Because the galaxy had said no one could hurt the shadows. No one could fight them. No one could stand against them. And yet, here was fragile humanity, defiant and burning, refusing to kneel. The battle raged for hours. Every time a human ship fell, 3 more surged forward. Every time silence threatened to consume them, voices rose louder, angrier, more determined. And then came the turning point. A squadron of human pilots, their fuel tanks nearly empty, their weapons gone, made a decision. They angled their ships not away, but toward the nearest shadow. They pushed their throttles to maximum, their comms filled with the sound of steady breathing, whispered prayers, quiet goodbyes. And then they rammed their ships directly into the darkness. For one blinding second, light erupted. A shadow beast staggered, cracked, and then, impossible, shattered into fragments of nothingness. The void itself screamed. Earth went silent. Billions held their breath. And then the cheering began. Humanity had destroyed one of the unstoppable, one of the untouchable. And in that moment, the galaxy's cruelest truth shifted into humanity's greatest weapon. The shadows could bleed. The unstoppable could be stopped. The invincible could fall. Fear had become fury. Fury had become defiance. And defiance had become hope. But even as humanity celebrated, the stars trembled. Because the shadows were not finished. They had only begun. And they were coming now, not in dozens, but in thousands. The war was far from over. And the true test of humanity's fire had only just begun. If you feel that spark of defiance, stay with us. Humanity's stand is only beginning. Subscribe now because the next chapter will test us beyond anything we've ever faced.
The fires faded. In the wake of the Maw's destruction, Earth was quiet. The skies no longer burned, but the silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of loss. Families gathered in the streets, eyes tilted upward, searching the heavens for ships that would never return. The price of survival had been steep. Entire fleets gone, cities blacked out. And Admiral Reyes, humanity's voice, humanity's courage, now only a memory, is carried in the hearts of billions. But it was not despair that lingered. It was something else. For the first time in recorded history, Earth was united, not by fear, not by rivalry, but by sacrifice. Nations that had once fought bitterly now shared resources, scientists, soldiers. Families who had once been strangers opened their homes to survivors from the stars. Humanity, once mocked as reckless and small, had become something greater. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Survivors from fallen civilizations turned their gaze toward Earth. Broken fleets limped toward human space, carrying refugees who spoke of empires long dead. And in their voices was awe. The humans fought the darkness. The humans scarred the unscarred. The humans endured. No one had expected it. No one had believed it possible, yet now humanity's name carried a weight it had never known before. A name no longer dismissed, but feared and respected. Children grew up drawing not pictures of monsters, but of stars burning brighter. Songs were written of the pilots who rammed the void. Statues were raised to the admiral who whispered defiance into the abyss. And in every corner of Earth, from the busiest cities to the quietest villages, one truth echoed: we are still here. But beneath the hope was a shadow. The Maw was gone, but the war was not over. The enemy would return, stronger, angrier, relentless. Humanity had won a battle, not the war. And yet, perhaps that was enough. Because for the first time, the galaxy knew the truth.
The shadows were not invincible. They could bleed, they could fall. And it was humanity, the fragile ones, the stubborn ones, the unbreakable ones, who had proven it. As the world rebuilt, a vow took root. Humanity would be ready. The next time the shadows came, they would not face a desperate species scrambling to survive. They would face a united people, tempered by sacrifice, hardened by loss, and fueled by defiance. And when that day comes, the galaxy will remember who lit the fire in the dark. The galaxy will remember who refused to kneel. The galaxy will remember humanity. Final CTA, legacy style. If that ending struck you, don't let the fire fade. Like this video, share it, and subscribe, because the story of humanity's defiance has only just begun. And trust me, you'll want to see what comes next.